So, speaking of anything we can get, Bernard Dranville is our new provincial education minister. That's not a bad thing to say, is it? No. And yesterday, one of my favorite quotes, and we're going to hang on to this one for quite a while, Bernard Dranville trying to explain changes in the French system where they want kids to be more proficient because the pass rate actually has fallen in the last few years. It's just basically down below 70%. And during the press conference yesterday, he, of course, said, because he said he knew he'd get that question, how do you account for the fact that on the French side, the rate is so low, yet on the English side, through the school boards here, the rates are basically over 90%? And when asked the question, he said this.
I have no idea.
Right. So that's what he said.
You got to appreciate his candor.
As honest, apparently, as the day is long. Russell Copeman is Executive Director of the Quebec English School Boards Association. He's on the line right now. Russ, thanks for being here this afternoon. Look, that answer with, I don't have any idea, as honest as it was, led to another question, which was the changes that he is now apparently going to make on the French side. What's he going to do? Is he planning to do that on the English side as well? Will there be changes? And the answer to that was basically not yet. So I'm wondering what your reaction was to what you heard yesterday first.
Yeah, the Premier said something interesting in an interview a couple of days ago. He said, with regard to why the government of Quebec wants to name directors general of school service centers and school boards, the Premier said, when things are not going well, when educational success isn't there, we may need to make a change. The reality is that in our network, the English language network, we're 5 points ahead of the Quebec average in terms of success rate, the way the Ministry of Education measures it. We have 3 boards with a success rate over 90%. Of the top 10 in the province of Quebec, 5 of the top 10 school service centers and school boards combined are English language school boards. There are 61 French language school service centers and 9 school boards, and of our 9 school boards, 5 of them are in the top 10.
Wow.
Public policy legislation is supposed to correct a problem. And, the first thing we sort of observe is, what's the problem that he wants to correct in the English language network? And frankly, if you look at student success, there is not a huge problem there. No one's resting on their laurels. School boards can do better, absolutely. But when compared to the overall Quebec average, we're already doing that much better. And the need for this sort of draconian centralization of power is not demonstrated by the government of Quebec.
Okay, look, to be fair, he didn't say there would be changes, but then again, he didn't say there wouldn't be. So let's leave it at that. I want to ask you, though, will this affect on the French taught within the English system? Are you concerned that there'll be changes there? Does that seem to stretch into that?
The powers are so broad, Aaron, that the minister, Bill 23, empowers the minister to annul decisions of a school board, to substitute decisions of a school board, to change the priorities of a school board, to look at the educational services that a board provides. Right? These are very wide-ranging and sweeping powers given to the Minister of Education. Who knows exactly what they'll do with them? And that's part of the problem. I heard the minister say we're respecting the rights of the English community because when it comes to directors general, I will name Anglophones as directors general. Well, that completely misses the point of our constitutional protection. Our constitutional protection says, as interpreted by the Supreme Court of Canada, that the power to name administrators is the exclusive authority of the minority community, that is to say, of the English-speaking community. It's not who gets named that's important. It's who has the power to name. And the Supreme Court of Canada, in the landmark Maé case, is absolutely clear that the exclusive authority to name administrators, directors general, assistant directors general, school principals, that exclusive authority lies with the minority language community representatives, that is to say, the elected school board officials. And so, these are kinds of the things that we're going to try and tell the minister and the parliamentarians tomorrow. This government does not understand the breadth and the scope of the control and management rights of our community with regard to education as afforded by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. They don't get it, or they get it and they just choose to ignore it. And that has to stop.
Agreed. Russell, your group, the Quebec English School Boards Association, is the only English group invited to speak at these public hearings. The English Parents Committee Association, not invited. They're very upset about it. What do you make of that? There
are 25 groups that have been invited over 4 days of hearings. As you pointed out, 5 days of hearings. As you pointed out, the QESBA is the only group from the English-speaking community or from the English Education Network. It's an absolute outrage that the two parent federations on the French side were invited, the Regroupement des comités de parents autonomes du Québec and the Fédération des comités de parents du Québec, and that the English Parent Committee Association was excluded. It's an outrage that the Quebec Provincial Association of Teachers was excluded. It's an outrage that the Quebec Community Groups network was excluded. You know, when you only accept to hear the QESBA, we're pleased that we are accept to be heard. But when you only accept to hear the QESBA and you exclude the teachers union, you exclude the parents, you don't invite administrators, I think it calls into question the good faith of these consultations.
Look, I remember this idea, and again, it is difficult to imagine why the government would go to the great lengths it's going on the French side and then just basically ignore the English side, with the exception here of the QESBA. I'm going to ask you a dumb question, maybe, Russell, which is, are you at least hopeful, by virtue of the fact that you do get to appear at these hearings, that something can happen or will change?
Well, the minister previously said that he was standing by his bill, that these changes would go through. So they won't go through this session. I think everyone's relieved about that. The National Assembly rises on Friday, so we'll have more time. And, what's interesting is that since the creation of linguistic school boards, there has been a recognition that the English-speaking community has a different governance model. Even in Bill 40, which was brought in by this government, there's a different governance model that is particular to the English community because of our charter rights to control and management. Bill 23 breaks with that tradition and says we're going to treat English language school boards the exact same way when it comes to governance as we treat school service centers. That's a break in Quebec legislation, it's a break with tradition in Quebec, and it's unconstitutional. And so we're going to try and convince them that they should do what they've done in the past, that is to say, recognize there's a different governance model in our community and just exempt English language school boards from this bill, certainly from those provisions that are unconstitutional. There's some things in there. There's provisions on distance education. There's the creation of the Institut National d'Excellence en Éducation. There's some provisions with regard to the collection of information. We don't have a great deal to say about those issues. We don't necessarily oppose them. But those provisions that are so clearly unconstitutional because they violate our community's rights to control and manage our education system should simply be dropped as they apply to English language school boards.
And we will leave it at that. Russell, I thank you so much. I guess we'll chat once this is all over and see what happens next. Thanks so much for being on with us today.
A pleasure.
Russell Copeman, he is Executive Director of the Quebec English School Boards Association.